Hi everybody, it's crazy, it's Sunday, and it's time for the UPBGE video of the week. Now before I get started, gotta give a shout out to my trusted, because you guys rock, to my crazy fam, I love you guys. Now, we're up to episode number 143, and we left off last week on the very bottom of page 4, but if you go to page 5, you can just scroll up just an eighth of an inch, and you'll see Blenderplayer. The file we left off with was this one, which is culling.blend. And it was just so you don't have to look at the white screen. So let's get started. Alright, so Blenderplayer. One of the strengths of the game engine is its tight integration with Blender and the almost instantaneous feedback you get when starting a game inside the Blender viewport. Let me switch over here so I can roll. This mix of level editor, character design, and general asset management is indeed a trend in the game industry nowadays. Often, we see game engines that have been brought inside the 3D editing tools. There needs to be a distinction between the editing tool and the development tool. So, your game, once published, needs to be a software application on its own. The player shouldn't be aware of the tool you are using. Not that Imagines never reveal their secrets. You can include a good description of your tools in your credits if that pleases you. But to go through the Blender interface to open your game will certainly break the spell. In other words, you don't want to go through this in order to play your game, because that confuses people unless they're into Blender. Okay, that will confuse them. They'll be like, okay, now what? Where's the play button? Where's my play button? And they're going to see this over here and then run either one, and they're not going to understand it unless they're running Blender. You're going to need an executable. Okay, so export as runtime. As we mentioned earlier, Blenderplayer is a way to play back your files independently of Blender. The first step is to make sure that the Save as Game Engine Runtime add-on is enabled. So you're going to do that by going to File, going to User Preferences, and up here you're going to type as Run. And then you're going to see Game Engine Run Game as Save as Game Engine Runtime. Say that 5 times fast. Okay, so you're going to make sure you're going to want to check that, okay? And then also always save it. I've already, as you see, already had it checked. Alright, so with that, you will wind up getting this when you hit File and you go to Export, okay? This will open up a dialog for you to use when you save your binary file, which works differently in different operating systems, okay? So, once you go through the export and you come into here, you'll see this. Okay, now you can save this as a game engine runtime. Okay, right there, up at the very top. Alright, so that will make it to where you can make your own little game. Okay, you'll make everything into your game. Make sure you have that in a file that you wanted to. I'm not wanting to make this into a game, so. Alright. So once you run it through the file menu, export the save as game engine runtime. This will open up a dialog box for you to choose what you want, where you want to save it. In Windows, a few files will be copied to the folder you exported the runtime to. The main file is an executable.exe that you will be using to launch your game. The name of the file is the one you choose in the export dialog. So whatever you choose up in the dialog box, okay? Let's go ahead and do it again just so you can see. Okay, whatever you choose up here, if I put it as culling.blend, okay, it's going to be culling.blend.exe. It's not going to save it as anything else but that, okay? So understand that. So whatever you're going to name your game, you want to name it that. You want to name it Howard the Duck, you name it howardtheduck.exe. Okay, and then click Save as a Game Engine Runtime. Okay, let's see. It contains both your Blender file, .blend, okay, and the Blenderplayer.exe bundled together. A few libraries .dll are presented as well. They are needed to play your game, so make sure to bring them with your executable file, or executable wherever it goes. Copy, zip, pack. Okay, so whenever you do that, make sure that you have everything in there and then you can zip it up, or you can pack it up, or whatever, however you want to pack it, and then you're done. You keep it all in one folder. Okay. Finally, something that is present in all operating systems. You will find a folder that contains the files needed to run Python scripts. The folder is named after the current version, for example, 2.66/Python. So if I were to save this at culling.blend, it will come up in the folder view as culling.blend.exe, but then it will have a folder that is named, in my case, would be 2.79.7. Okay, so that's what it will save it as. Okay, and other times it might, I don't think it'll save it as 0.2.5. Okay, I don't think so, but I'll have to ask Day about that. All right, so Linux, in Linux and Mac OS X, the Blenderplayer binary is static linked to the libraries. That means that you have one single executable file that contains almost everything you will need. The newly created file, named from the export as runtime dialog, already has the proper user permission to be run by any user. Okay, so if you're running Linux or Mac, it will automatically save everything in one file. Okay, so that's just going to be a very heavy executable file. All right, so just like the Windows runtime, in Linux we have a folder with the files needed for the script, Python scripts. Even if the system already has Python installed, Blenderplayer, and Blender, for that matter, relies on one particular version of Python for its execution. This prevents your games from running into capability issues with different Python versions that may exist on the user system. This also allows you to use compiled Python scripts, as we will see soon. Okay, so don't worry about the trying to it's gonna give you Python, a Python version that you are recording it in. So whatever Python version you got for this Windows is what the Python version will be. So you ain't got to worry about some dude who has Python 6000, is going to be like, it's not working. Well, because it should work with just this, because it will have the runtime with it. Okay. Max OS X. In this case, the export as runtime creates an executable .app that you can run by double-clicking on it. This executable is named from the export dialog, but it's no more than a folder you can explore via the command line. This folder contains the Blender executable, the Blender file, game.blend, and Python libraries, and the icons used for the game file. Okay? Using Blenderplayer without exporting your game. You don't need to export your game every time you want to test it in the Blenderplayer. In the same folder where you installed Blenderplayer, you can find the Blender executable run it from the command line console with your file as argument blenderplayer.exe /myfilewindows.blend. Okay, you can do it that way, or you can just run it from here just to look at it. Okay, you don't want to run your game every time through Blender to make sure that it's working. You have to break it all back down, do all this. No, just go ahead and just, while you're building the game, use your standalone player or your embedded player to see what you want to see. Okay. .blend /blenderplayer.app /contents /Mac OS /blenderplayer /myfileosx.blend for Mac users, and /blenderplayer /myfilelinux.blend. If you run it with the argument H, you can see all the options available through the command line for Linux. Okay. Another option is to use the Start button to the Standalone Player tab in the Scene menu to launch the current file in Blenderplayer. See interface options next in this chapter. Okay, what it's talking about is this one right here. We're going to go ahead and go on to that. Resource files. Often, your game will need more than you've enclosed in Blender. For example, if you decided not to pack the textures into your file, you will need to copy them to the same folder structure as they were originally. Okay, the same applies to the sounds, fonts, movies, Python, scripts, and so on. So you want a texture folder for your textures. You want a sound folder for your sounds. You want a font folder for your fonts. You want a movies for your move or mov folder for your movies, and you want a Python folder for your Python scripts that you're using, and so on. I can't stress it enough that you really need to have folders for your stuff. Try not to pack everything into one Blender file, because if you do, you got a problem and things can go awry fast. Alright, so next up, interface options. In the render panel, you will find a few specific options for Blenderplayer as shown in figure 9-2, or as you can see right here in your render panel here. There's a lot to go with, comparable to the old 2.6 version. This is also 2.79, but they're basically the same. Okay, you can adjust your resolution for your monitor. I set this one up, originally it was at 640 by 720 or something like that. I can't exactly remember, but this one right here, I put it up to this because I wanted to be able to do full screen. So if you run it in the standalone player, now, oops, let me try to bring it back. There we go. I don't know why it rolls, but now it's full screen. Okay, you can change it to whatever size you want. In the embedded player, it's a little bit different because now it's doing it in the viewport. Okay, so wherever the viewport setting is, and that's what it is. It's doing it that. Okay, so remember that if you're running the embedded player, it's showing you what you see on in your 3D viewport. If you're running the standalone player, it will give you a window the size of whatever this is, which I will go into detail in just a second. Okay, so for the start, which is start up here, okay, or actually here, standalone player, a quick way to launch your game in Blender. It will open it in a new window, which you all saw. You need to save your file first. Always save your files. Trust me, it's bad if you don't. Alright, don't mistake this with the start button in the embedded player tab, which is this one. Make sure you use the standalone player if you want the window, the embedded player if you want it in 3D viewport, which plays the game inside Blender. Alright, so the width and height. The width and height of the embedded player determines the aspect ratio of the camera. The ones in the Blender player panel change the actual size of the screen. Okay, so these change the size of the screen. Okay, you can also click over here on full screen and it will gauge whatever your screen actually is. Okay, AA samples. Okay, I don't think we have AA samples in this one. Let's see, where would it be at? Nope, they don't have it in there. Okay, so I don't know what AA samples is. I guess it's anti-aliasing samples. For smooth rendering edges, yeah, anti-aliasing. You can turn on anti-aliasing. If the computer running the game does not support a specific level of AA, or doesn't support AA at all, the game engine will fall back to the maximum supported parameter. So, I think they got rid of that because of the fact that it's an automatic thing, but you can always come here into the system and turn it on to whatever number you feel you need to. I always run it with it off because it really doesn't need to be on, because I am not working with super tight edges. If you've got a good program and you want to make it towards these, then you can turn it on to whatever, or you can set this as, if you know how to use Python, set this as part of your settings for your game. Alright, so bit depth and refresh rate. Okay, so that's these two right here. You won't notice that in the resolution for the embedded because of the fact that it's just going to do it in viewport. This is for the standalone player. Okay, so your bit depth and your refresh rate. The color depth and the refresh rate of the graphics. Okay, so most of them you want it on 16, and bit depth you want at like 32. Okay, you can change this whatever you want, but I suggest you leave them alone. They're not worth messing with. Okay, so framing, I believe that they took that out as well because it's not really needed. What you what can you do when the screen is scale? Okay, choose one of these three options: letterbox, extended, and scale, which should be, yeah, right down here. Okay, which would be in your display, which would be letterbox, extended, and scale for your frame. Okay, so that's changed in the older version. Okay, so it's got its own little deal. It's in that. Okay, let's see. Scale will stretch the frame to the new screen size, except some aspect ratio distortions. Oh, expect. Yeah, expect some, ratio distortions. Extend will reveal more of the frame, as if you had changed the Blenderplayer to the embedded player resolution at the same time. Letterbox will fill any difference between the camera aspect ratio, embedded player resolution, and the screen size with the color you choose in the colored box. Black by default. Okay, so as you see, that's black. And if I come up here and run it in a window, okay, mine definitely, I don't know why it wants to do that now. There we go. Okay. All right, so as you see, mine fills the screen. So say if I just put it to full screen and then try it that way, okay, and ta-da. Okay, so there you go. But mine is set at letterbox, and my aspect ratio is the same size as my screen, and full screen does the same. So, and this is that I'll say. So if I did it on letterbox, let's do letterbox instead, and let's hit start. Okay, nope. Let's go ahead and take it off full screen, and let's try it that way. Nope. Okay, so I'd have to change the size. So let's just take it down. Let's do 19. Let's do 1800. Let's just make it funny. 1800 by 980. Let's see. No, why not? 980. Okay. So now if I hit it, as you notice, there's a little black line at the top of my screen. So because now the aspect ratio has changed because it's saying it's a different one, but it's giving a full screen. Okay. So again, if I did it on full screen, you'll see that it does not. Okay. So you can always change these. Okay. I don't. Oh, I did one. Okay. Right, 19 by 20. Well, I did do it right because it does it by what the viewport shows. But I want to keep that. 10. There we go. Okay, so when you do that, even if you do it here, if I did that the same way, if I put that at 18, I put that at 9, and then I hit start. Okay, now it does it the same size. Okay, get off full screen too. So let me try not to do it. Okay, as you see now, my box is smaller. Okay, my box is smaller, and you see the black edges. Okay, so that's if you do it letterbox. Let's see. Let's do it 17. Okay, now you see that it's getting smaller, and now the top and bottom are. Okay, so you can change the aspect ratio to whatever you want. Okay, and I need to change that back to 90 or 19, which is what my screen size is, because I really don't want to mess it up right now. It will freak me out later. There we go. Okay, so as you see, I have it on extended and the scale, whatever the scale is. Okay, all right, so that was framing. Okay, so they changed that. It's no longer there. Because Blender is available for free to anyone. Oh, file security. I'm sorry. File security, guys. Because Blender is available for free to everyone, if you distribute your game as a Blender file.blend, there is really no way to prevent people from firing up Blender and taking a peek at your Blender file. Even if the game is packed and made into a runtime in the form of a single executable, it is still relatively easy for someone to, with a bit of technical skill, to extract the game data. The bottom line is that packing, compressing, and making runtime are just conveniences for you. A Blender file is never secure against a curious and determined evil mind. Alright, so if the game involves multiple players connected across the internet, the only way to make sure that the game is tamper-proof is to do rigorous checking on the server. Any client-side Python code to ensure integrity can be easily modified by the user, and so it is effectively useless. For example, for a shooter game, the game server should keep track of the remaining ammunition for each player. This way, a malicious player would not be able to cheat by altering his own ammunition count. Alright? So basically, if you want to keep it secure, you're going to have to take more steps than just creating just a runtime executable. Okay, you're gonna have to find an encryption program that can encrypt it and unencrypt it as the game loads. Okay, I would suggest that if you want to keep your, if you don't care if anybody gets into your game, hey, just pack it up, send it to people. I did that with a couple games and my zombie games, but if somebody decided to make it better, kudos, do it. But it wasn't no big deal. It was just for fun. It was a tutorial style game, and it really doesn't matter. But if you're wanting to have a really good game, you don't want people messing up your game and making it different and calling it theirs, then you want to get encryption programming. Okay. Let's see. The part of the program you can easily protect is the Python scripts. Although the plain text.py file is easy to be read by anyone, a compiled script is an unintelligible blob of binary code. To compile your script, all you need to do is run it once, and the game engine will generate a .pyc file for you. This file can be found in the same folder as your original scripts in a subfolder called _pycache_. Now all you need to do is to replace the original script files .py by their compiled version .pyc. Alternatively, you can use Python standalone to generate a pyc file. Python -m compile all -b if you're into coding. Okay, even though your production files will be exposed, this is not the end of the world. Your work is still protected under the licensing rights, which happens to be our next topic. What are the odds? Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and leave it there. We will do licensing next week. We've been jabbering on for 23 minutes, so we're going to leave it there with that until next week. So licensing at the, say, I'm going to say a little bit down from the top of the screen on page 9. Next week, licensing. So let me switch over to this and that. There we go. Okay. We've learned a lot about publishing. When you're doing your game, okay, you want to pack it up as a runtime player. Okay, a single engine runtime, so it has an exe file that they can click on. You can add icons. If you got an icon maker, you can make an icon for it and have it as the number 1 or whatever. You can put whatever you want on it. And then make sure you try to secure your files if you don't want people to get to them, like they were talking about changing the Python to a different name and compiling it differently in computer code that people can't see it. And then take that and get yourself an encoding program that can encode it to where it can't be just picked apart easily by some curious dude who just happened to get Blender for the first time and found your game. and decided to open it all the Blender files. You can actually change a lot of things if you have a security program, not a security program, an encryption program that can actually hide a lot of your aspects. You're not going to get, locks deter honest thieves. Okay, that's just the way it looks. If you put a lock on it, an honest, person will look at it and go, okay, well, I'm not going to find out anything. Who cares? I'm just going to play the game. You got modders out there who are not so honest thieves, so to speak, and they want to modify the game to where it better fits their narrative, or they want to make it more fun, especially if the game's old and you've been playing it for a while and you're kind of getting tired of it. Modders go in there and try to pick it apart, and if you got a good encryption program, it'll kind of be like, do I want to go through this extra work, to do all this, to just so I can change the character look of this game. And if you have a very good encoding program or a encryption program, that will help out a lot, even more so. Okay, so look into that. But licensing will also help too, because if somebody does modify your game and tries to make another game of it, and you have a different licensing on it, then hey, it's free to do. Just give me a shout saying, hey, this is based on such game. If you have a harder licensing than that, the one that says that, hey, you can't modify, change, do this, do that, then that makes it to where you can turn around and sue them if they try to make a game like yours. But also copyright infringement laws, you can actually get it copyrighted and do the same, so on and so forth. But licensing does help. We'll talk about that next week. So page 9, but a little bit down from the bottom. Next week, see you then.